There they are.
There it is. Hey, everyone.
There it is.
Trivium, we're back with our weekly television update. We got Josh with us here today, producer. Say hello, Josh.
How you doing, everybody?
People out there. Yeah, we wanted to have a chat with you. People are always asking us about all the ins and outs of like how we record stuff, so we figured it'd be awesome to get you on here to actually talk about all those things because you know it better than us. So yeah, maybe we could start with like maybe a little bit of your story of like how you got into like mixing and producing, like how you got to work with Andy Wallace and kind of the route it took you into this world.
Sure. Let's see. I mean, I think I started like everybody, right? Like you play in a band when you're in high school and just kind of get involved in enjoying the recording process of it. Maybe also realizing at the same time I'm not as good of a musician as I thought that I was, but I'm real good at recording other ones. So, I was just playing in bands in high school until I moved to New York. I got an internship, went to like a 2-year school, came back and ended up mopping floors at a studio in New York from midnight till 8 in the morning. And worked my way through the ranks. Like became an assistant engineer, became a house engineer, got picked up by a pop group, and ended up with this Full Force Productions doing a bunch of pop records. I had met Andy at Soundtrack. I'm really like rapping like 5 years into like 30 seconds here.
This is the too long didn't read version of it.
Yeah. And yeah, I ended up doing a bunch of pop, hip hop, and R&B records for a couple years, and then I moved back. And I went back one day to visit with Andy Wallace just because I hadn't seen him in a long time, and I was still friends with everybody at that studio. And he was like, "Hey, you available to do some work tomorrow?" I was like, "Yeah." And then I edited drums for him on something. I don't remember what it was. I think it was Shinedown or Seether. I actually don't remember, but I just got hired real quick by him to do something, and then after that, his management called me and were like, "Hey, you want to go to LA and like do some like Pro Tools work on this System of a Down record?" And I was like, no. No, I actually said no because I'd been working with Full Force for like 2 years doing pop records, and I was afraid they were like not going to take me back and I was going to lose my gig. And then I like sat on it for like 24 hours and I'm like, what the fuck am I thinking? Of course I want to do this. And I like called management back. I was like, is it still okay to say like, yeah, I want to go to LA and do that System of a Down thing? And they were like, man, we never even told them you said no.
What record was that?
They know now.
It was the Steal This Album record. It was like a bunch of B-sides. But it all had to be assembled.
You're the kombucha mushroom people. You are the
I had to like some of it was on tape, and they had tracked other things on Pro Tools, and it was like a total nightmare. They had edited the songs in Pro Tools, and
oh my god,
it became like it was like an organizational nightmare that they needed someone to like pull it all together. So
were some of the first projects you worked on? Were you still using tape at any of the first few years of you doing stuff?
Yeah,
that's always. I feel like that's like one of the. That's such a crazy thing, like because I feel like now, I mean, we've never done any of our records to tape or anything, but just like seeing those machines in the corner and just like how precise you had to be with the cuts to edit things, like it's wild. Like going from that, and then in like a few decades, it's like digitally changed everything.
Yeah, I remember my last record on tape actually. Because I think it's still, I have a picture of that tape machine as like the home screen on my phone for the last decade plus. But like we were recording with Garth Richardson up in Vancouver. I used to do a lot of engineering for him. And we had been doing things on Pro Tools for a while at that point. So I had probably been a year or so away from a tape machine, but he wanted to track the drums to tape. But we had it locked up to Pro Tools, so at any given point, we could just transfer it over and do whatever we needed. And he was like, all right, let's punch in the bridge, on the tape, on the drums. And I was like, cool, let me just like safety it off into Pro Tools first. And he was like, no, let's just do the punch. And I'm like, he wants more than anything for me to botch this punch. Like he is begging for me to blow it so he can rip on me. And I remember looking at him like, okay, all right, been a little while, but I got this. Like, because there's an art to punching on tape. You have to be a little early and a little late coming out, or vice versa. Like, because where the heads sit, where the playback and the record head is, it's like there's an actual technique to it.
Yeah, now it's just a fancy plugin on Pro Tools
Yes.
that just has the machine going. That doesn't really mean anything, but it looks cool.
It's a sweet graphic.
Do you feel like the plugin is like comparable to it though? Do you think it's like within the ballpark of like analog?
Honestly, when I switched, because I used to be an SSL guy, I used to mix completely on SSLs, and I was, wasn't one of the first dudes to switch over to in the box. I was pretty late in the game on that, and it was a hard transition for me because the console did things, and the analog stuff did things that I wasn't even aware that it was doing at the time. Like maybe like the channel was overloading and like clipping something, and I just liked how it sounded. I didn't necessarily think about what it was doing. And then, so all of a sudden I'm mixing in the box and I'm like using the SSL channel strip, and I'm like, why is this not sounding the same? It's supposed to be the same. It's not the same. And, it took a while for me to kind of come up with a new, like, I know the records I mixed, like my first couple of records that were mixed totally in the box, and I'm still like, oh God, I can't listen to that. Like, just stress out thinking about it. I think Gojira L'Enfant Sauvage was literally the second record I mixed in the box.
Oh.
Maybe the third.
So that wasn't that long ago then that you switched.
I think it's longer than we think.
Maybe.
It has to be I still lived in New York back then, so it had to be like 10 years or less.
All right. Well, I guess maybe we can dive into some of these fan questions because they had a lot
I've got a thing that I wanted to chat with everybody because I know everyone always wants to talk about vocals. This was a really interesting story I felt because people have been saying like how aggressive and how angry we all sound in a good way, in a complimentary way. Like vocally, I've never sounded this way, but there was a really interesting thing that happened on Sin of the Sentence that made me determine that Josh was the perfect guy to work with Trivium. And that is, so basically the five of us, we're always having a good time. The five of us are always like happy-go-lucky. It's just making jokes, it's eating good food, and wanting to be really good at what we do. That's the vibe of the five of us. When there's one day in the middle of vocals where I came in, I was having a bad day. It was a bad day in the world, bad day in my own personal world. And I assumed that my vocals should sound pretty good. I remember Josh and I, we kept hitting takes. And finally, we both looked at each other like, all right, let's call it a day. Let's wrap it up. So we wrapped it up. Came in the next day. Everything was back to normal. We're all telling jokes, good vibe, good mood. Came in and redid the same stuff in between like laughing about stuff. And I sounded 10 times more authentically pissed off in a good way than ever by doing this. So I've found out that the five of us all do so well by wanting to work really hard and being really goofy and being in a good mood. And it's amazing. I've never worked with someone like Josh where having that direct feedback when I do something well, and it's not that I'm looking for like compliments. That's not what Josh is doing, but like I'm feeling something came out good. I look over and Josh is like jumping up and down with his arms. He's like, yeah, like that, dude, that pumps me up so much. Like even just seeing that, like I'm ready to record now. And that's such an interesting vibe that we drew out the most aggressive sounding 2 records of our career with Josh out of just having a good time. And I don't know if that's really a question. It's more of a statement of how much I love working with you, Josh.
Well, you got a pretty good aggressive catalog. So I'm a fan of some of a lot of the early stuff too. So, my point, if we're not having fun making records, like why are we even doing this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
I say
the
that
whole
about
point,
people
right?
and
Like,
everything. Yeah. If you're in a band, you better be enjoying it.
I actually got thinking about something working with you guys and a couple of the bigger bands that I've worked with, that it's funny how unique this is to a couple of bands that I work with. And it's that, like, when we make the Trivium record, I don't remember a time ever where we referenced another band. Like, we never listened to another band. When I mixed, I never listened to anything else. I just mixed what I had and what felt right for the record that we were making. I think that's like a pretty important thing that's like missed a lot of things. Like a lot of bands spend so much time, like nothing drives me more nuts as a producer mixer. Someone's like, I want it to sound like, and they reference some other band. I'm like, why do you want to do that? Like, can't we just get something awesome here that we all like and high five and just make our own thing? And I feel like some of the better records come about when we're just focused on doing what we want to do rather than what other people want us to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And we'd never even referenced like old Trivium stuff. Like we never really queued up Ascendancy, for example, in the studio and said, all right, let's look for that tone. We just always know. I think it's because the five of us, you know, Alex during Trivium and before Trivium, Josh during Trivium, before Trivium, three of us as well, we all have put in so much time of practice and doing what we do and doing what we love that, yeah, we never have to think about it because it's so natural to this point. And that's why these records are the way they are. Like we've been doing all the promo tour stuff from home. And I feel like that's why I've got a lot of these default Hafey statements ready to go. But there's only been a time, 3 times in our career, Crusade, Silence, and Vengeance, where we said we have to stay in a lane. Let's stay here. Let's not go too over here, too far over there. But Sin and Deadman, we never set any limits. We never said we shouldn't do this or shouldn't do this or shouldn't go this fast or shouldn't have this kind of song. We just went for it and never second guessed anything. Really, the only thing that I loved about the last record that I referenced in a chat that Josh wasn't here about Josh, remember we were blowing through this one so fast. One day you were like, I got to make sure this is good. I'm not sure. This is going so fast. I'm not sure. Is it good? And then the next day you're like, yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Sometimes they're moving so fast. I'm like, wait, whoa, hold on. I'm not even sure what song we're working on right now.
and to give everyone perspective, this one was fast, right? Like 16 days is pretty quick.
Well, that was 16 in Orlando.
Well,
16 in Orlando.
16
13 and 3.
Like
13 and 3, I thought.
No, I think we were, because I think in LA for at least 3 or 4
16.
days.
We were recording at 6:06 from like Monday through Friday, because we finished like our colonized vocals on the last day of we were in the studio.
Yeah,
I want to ask.
Setting up
we need to
drums
have
takes a
more
day on its own.
We need to have.
I wanted to ask this question from someone. This I think applies to what we did because this is the first time we did this on the record, and someone was asking, Josh, where you got the idea to flip doing the drums last on a record as opposed to recording them first. Like when we first worked with you, it was like drums first and then everything else. And then this one we switched to this other style. Like what made you come up with that?
A lot of it's logistics. I mean, realistically, you know, every record I've ever done, I come in with what I think. I have a plan on how I'm going to do the record. And very often I think one of my biggest strengths is being able to change my plan in the middle of it or when like approached with a band that wants to work slightly different. I think we decided just based on scheduling, right? And also like if you do drums last, the theory you back up. Like generally speaking, you go in and you like if you're gonna track, you could either track all live as a band, which Trivium's actually one of the bands that could handle doing that. You guys are tight enough players, but nobody ever wants to do that, and I understand why. So then the next theory is, well, we're going to put up a click. Matt and Corey are going to just do like a quick pass through on the guitars, not really paying attention too much. And then Alex is supposed to play to the click and the scratch guitars. But like, I mean, what sense does that really make if he's playing to the click and the scratch guitars? Because they're going to be loose. And 9 out of 10 times when I have a drummer doing that, they're like, can you turn the guitars down for this part? Like, I just need to lock into the click. Like, so what are we actually playing to? Like,
yeah.
It's just the placeholder, the scratch guitars. There's not even where it's going to be. The drums are focused more on the clicks. So if we program the drums, quantize them perfect, but move, like you guys remember how we all did it. We went in Alex played it. We moved clicks. We changed tempos up and down. We shifted. We played it to the click and made sure that nobody felt the changes. Like it just felt natural, right? That's kind of the general. If the click's moving and the drummer's hearing it, but nobody else is, and they just think the song feels right, then we've probably got the template correct. So with that in mind, we use these perfect drums. The guitars lock in, play everything perfect to that. And then when Alex plays, he's playing to like perfect guitar takes. And like he doesn't even necessarily he can listen, obviously he can have the click in there, but he can actually lock into what the guitars are doing. And in a weird way, I end up having to edit less because he's so locked in when he's playing.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did that answer the question at all?
Yeah. I mean, Alex, how did you feel about that? Like, because
and he gets to play to the record.
Yeah. I mean, what was the
I do not
difference
get to play the record.
What was the difference from like the last record to this, or any record you've done before where you didn't record drums to the end?
Yeah, doing it like this, it was the first time for me, and I was in heaven. I mean, I was playing along. It was really able to help me get a good vibe. You know, I think when it comes to recording and tracking, it's all about catching that special vibe and hearing the vocals and the guitar and the bass. It just made everything just feel so like heavy and natural. So I feel like it brought a lot out of me, you know. And yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that next time we could do it the same way.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
You're in hot heaven.
Yeah, this way was really cool. I liked I love too how you explained before with us to us, Josh, about how when there's accents that happen vocally that are typically recorded last after drums, that you kind of lose that. And then if you do vocals before the drums, you can get those stabs of vocal accentuations with the drums after the fact, which I think is huge. That's a harder thing to do later on.
Yeah, because if you think about it, drums are logistically are the most expensive and the biggest ship to steer, right? It's like the biggest, most intense mic setup on the record. It's the most expensive studio time because, you know, we're going to go into a studio and like we need the large facility and everything. So the other main reason to do it, the other big reason to do it that way is if we do drums first, very often if the vocals aren't done, they're going to dictate like how long this part goes. You know, and a lot of times in the writing process and demoing process, you're like, yeah, I think the vocals are going to be like this. I'll dial it in when we actually make the record. Then you do dial it in and you're like, you know what, this should go one more cycle just for a setup, or we should do this. If you've already tracked the drums and you're doing vocals last, you're like, okay, I can edit the drums. I can move this and maybe I can steal a fill from over here. And like, you're kind of trying to make do with what you had rather than creating for what's there.
Mm-hmm. I remember you also saying that doing like having the MIDI drums and doing drums last, like if we're recording and stuff, like if we're like, hey, we get like a last minute like arrangement change or change a part, it's like way easier to edit that way than trying to edit like 20 something channels of like mics of acoustic drums and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. When Alex, like, you know, we did all the pre-pro and Alex helped set all the tempos and played through on the electric kit, and then, you know, Alex left. We had MIDI drums, cut rhythm guitars. Then Matt starts cutting vocals, and all of a sudden that exact scenario happens, right? We're like, oh, shoot, this should really come. Or actually, Bleed Into Me was completely rearranged after pre-pro. Like
that was the hardest song structurally for us, which is so weird. It was the easiest song, hardest for structure.
Yeah, and which was funny because when I heard it, I was like, this is easy. It just goes like this. But that structure change could have never happened had we done drums first, or we would have been setting up again and recutting drums, and it'd have been a total nightmare. But as it turns out, we changed the MIDI, moved things around. You know, the rhythm guitars moved in bricks. Maybe we punched like a slide or a transition or whatever had to happen, but it was an easy fix. Next thing you know, when Alex hears it, he's like, whoa, okay, let me go write my drum parts.
I'm not fucking playing this shit. Change it back.
I'm doing the original or I'm not doing it at all.
The original was better.
Well, I guess since we're talking about drum stuff, something that some people were asking about was kind of like mic setup stuff, but in particular, like one thing, you know, I think that's noticeable with like a lot of your mixes. I mean, of course, like Lamb of God and Gojira, like the cymbals are so crystal clear in the mix. Like, could you maybe give kind of a rough idea of like how you approach maybe mixing cymbals into like the mix? That's definitely probably one of the hardest parts.
Most of the a lot of the reasons I pick studios that I work at nowadays, there's actually a lot of studios nowadays that don't have consoles, and I really, really, really prefer recording drums in a studio with a large format console. Like Hybrid Studios is one of my favorites to work at. 606 was great. I mean, there's lots of great studios. But the reason I do that is I have a pretty elaborate setup on the miking, but it allows me a lot of control in the mix to get that clarity in the cymbals in particular. So like on Alex's kit, for example, like I'm trying to actually remember, we used a lot of Rode mics, and we used so I always do top and bottom on all the toms. And the reason I like a console where I track is because I always do top and bottom. I can bust those two out of one channel and just record one channel in Pro Tools So when I'm looking at it, Alex, what do we have, like 6 toms on this record, or 5 or something? It was a lot.
Yeah, it was quite a bit. It was the same as last time, just a whole bunch.
It's 6, I think. Maybe.
I think
Yeah,
it's
I think
6.
like
yeah,
5 or 6.
3, 4, 5. Yeah, 6.
That's how.
yeah.
That's how you know
So
it's a lot when you.
if you think on toms alone, that's 12. That's 12 tracks, or 12 microphones. Top and bottom, but they're all bussed in, and what I end up in Pro Tools is only 6, because heaven knows I don't want to see 12 tracks of toms in Pro Tools. That drive me insane. And then like on cymbals, I'll do, depending on the setup, every drummer is a little bit different, but I generally only stay like, I don't know, 18 inches or so away from the cymbal, and I kind of do them individual, or clusters, I guess, if you could think of it that way. I don't really use much of an overhead perspective. Sometimes I'll set up an overhead if the drummer has a kit that's very like not symmetrical. I might do an overhead kit just to kind of like, like put the cymbals, like I don't want them to just sound like they're one that's over here, or some drummers, like their kits are very right heavy, like they always are on these cymbals, they're always on these cymbals. So maybe I'll change up how I do it for something like that, but I'll do cluster cymbals about 18 inches away, so that way I can control each cymbal for the most part individually, the volume. This sounds like a boring conversation. We really like
No.
People
That's what they
always. People always
So what
ask me about
EQ
all
suite
kinda
do you like to
things.
use on your cymbals?
I'm just like, wow. And then
No, 'cause, like, I
Everyone's
think
laughing
like
in my
a lot
chat
of
now.
people, like obviously, we know a little bit about like our gear and stuff, but like where it kind of goes from like our playing and through our normal gear, it's just like kind of those other extra things that I think maybe people don't understand with like what you do. It's like you're thinking about the entire thing in one go. It's like, so every time you're recording something, thinking about the next couple steps ahead of like, okay, well, this is where the drums are going to be. And it's like to kind of know like I didn't even know that with the drums, of like how the shape of a drum set can really affect how you mic it. Like that's
Sure.
kind of a crazy thing to think about.
I spend time thinking about when I'm miking up drums, especially on like a single bass kit. If you think about it, like someone who plays a single bass kit, the kick drum's like dead center, right? And then, but their snare is actually off to the left of it, right? So if you get a mic up the center above the kick and the snare, in the overheads, if you have like, say, like an XY or whatever, the kick's going to lean slightly right and the snare's going to lean slightly left. That drives me insane. So like I'll always look at the kicks, the center of the kit. If you've got like a kick here and a snare drum here, if you're looking down on the kit, I'll set the mic access coming across it like that. And if you think about it, if you look how a drummer sets up their kit, let's say it's a 5-piece kit with 3 toms. By moving the XY from what you would traditionally think is the center to this, you've actually got tom 2 in the center now. Tom 1 is in the left.
That's crazy.
You know what I'm saying? Like all it really takes, like your mind makes you think that the kick drum is the center of the kit because that's how they set it up on the rug. But the reality is the center is like this. Does that make sense?
Wow.
Everyone with OCD right now is like scratching their face and watching their hands. Just
That's
triggered
amazing.
all of them.
That's
So much detail. Wow.
Josh, I think would be
Geometry 101 with Josh Wilbur.
Well, and also like, so if I'm making a cymbal over here and a cymbal over here, I usually use a drumstick and I kind of eyeball it, but I'm like, okay, is this one about the same distance from the snare? Is this one, to make sure that it's all going to even out. It's the setup of the kit is everything. And, I try to make it a point because like I've heard that other producers will tell the drummer they can't set up the kit the way that they're setting it up. You got to move this over here and move this. I'd like you to play the way you're comfortable. And I'd like to think that I can find a way to figure it out and make it work if I'm a decent engineer.
I love those stories of producers that do things to their instrumentalists. Like I was going to make up a story like that Josh put me in a porta potty and kicks it over and like hits it with a truck and I have to track vocals or something. That stuff doesn't work. That stuff doesn't work at all.
What was this story wasn't there?
Everybody needs different motivation.
He's put a gun on Alex.
Yeah, well, Paolo, you were saying you were going to start a rumor that Josh Wilbur like starved me in the studio, like didn't feed me for a week.
What did we say? He like kept you in a dirty, filthy pig pen, and you had to wear a pig nose and walk on all fours. That's why you track so well. Josh, would it be interesting for everybody? What quirks do maybe the four of us have when we're tracking that we don't know that everyone would find interesting? Nothing like they pick their butt or something. What kind of is there a quirk? Like I don't know if I'm sure I have them, but I don't know.
Of course there are quirks, but if I feel like but I feel like in telling you them it ruins my
you'll have to find new ones
on the next record.
Yeah. You'll have to find new ones.
He has to know how to work.
And we figured out the key thing for me. Like shoeless is something I figured out. Like I have to be barefoot or at least be in socks to sing better in key. Really? Yeah. I always take my shoes off for singing. But the other thing we figured out this last one, yes, the ear like this, like slightly off, but also having the headphone volume really low. We're having actually my vocals where I can't really hear them and the music just an okay level versus up here and up here like I do for shows.
I think for screamers that's like a pretty common thing. Like you want to like feel like you're battling through the band like you do at a show a little bit.
Everyone wants you to let us know these things, but I guess
I'll tell you, do you feel like I think it's interesting that Paulo plays standing up.
Yeah, that is.
Like I don't know of anybody else in the studio that stands when they record.
I don't want to stand and play guitar while I record.
And then but then likewise you always have the whatever.
I bring my own stool, my own drum stool, and my own footstool.
Yeah. I feel like the standing thing is like I haven't been doing that super long, but I kind of felt like just like on the last record, I don't know what it was. It was like sometimes when I'm like sitting down and trying to find the perfect like spot to be comfortable, it almost kind of psychs me out more than when I'm just standing up. I just feel like more comfortable, like I'm just like at rehearsal or something. I don't know if it's kind of like maybe a mental thing even.
I think comfort, and actually one of the things I like that we did when you tracked bass, which maybe we've forgotten about it or haven't, but like I don't know if you remember, I moved the speakers so that you were playing standing between two sets of monitors. And I was actually outside the center section so that you could hear your performance like more clearly than I could. And then I'd switch it over to my set of monitors so that I could check it after the fact.
Yeah, that was actually really good.
I actually started doing that on Gojira on L'Enfant Sauvage, just to put the player between the speakers and have my own set and switch between depending on if someone's playing.
That was very good because it's kind of tough when you're playing like, put it over to one side and then you have to kind of mess with that, and turning it back to kind of monitor it.
You're leaning over my shoulder like, does that sound good? I don't know. I can't hear anything over here.
I feel like since you brought up Gojira, we should address the laser squeak sound. We should address that because everyone, anytime they hear that, like, that's the Gojira rake. And I learned it from Joe. Joe actually taught with Gojira first time in like 2007 or so in the UK, and I love that sound. I was like, Joe, because I've been a fan from Mars to Sirius. Joe, how the heck do you make that sound? So he came down, he taught me how to do the rake. He taught me how to do the other thing he does, that palm strike off the G, B, and E strings, like and I asked him where he got it from, and he said he learned the idea from 90s death metal, which I thought was so cool. He said particularly from Morbid Angel, and so he's like passed that rake down. I think it's amazing that now people call that the Gojira sound, which is pretty awesome that they have a laser sound.
I called it that when I'd call it when I did the record. I don't think when I started the record with them, they had any of them in there, and I was like, "Where's the?" like begging them to put it into songs.
I've had a lot of people were like, "Oh, the Gojira thing," and I was like, "Well, Joe taught it to me. He got it from 90s death metal from Tampa, which is pretty awesome. That it made that full cycle." That it went from Florida to France back to Florida.
Joe told me that Hetfield handed him a guitar and was like, "Show me how you do that."
Come up with some sound on a guitar that people want to learn from me. I don't know what the heck that would.
Into the mic or scream into the pickup.
I was doing a thing. I remember on. And this is nasty. It wasn't as cool as a laser beam. My own sound.
I've never heard it called laser beam.
I've had some people call it that. The rates. You can't really spell out.
Pterodactyl sound.
You can make a good pterodactyl sound. Paulo can.
I'm not gonna do that on here
now. Alex is over there sitting on the pig squeal.
Oh yeah. We got a few of those into the signing the other day.
Nice.
Yeah.
Like on the I guess since we were talking about vocals, like a lot of people were kind of wondering how you track, multiple vocals and stuff, how to kind of thicken them up and stuff, like whether it's with plugins, recording, like what is your take on that? Because I know every vocalist is kind of different with, what you would use on their kind of tracking and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, so maybe say how we did it on this one and maybe compare it to some other stuff.
That's kind of a tough one because I'll even change my own opinion of it throughout the making of a record. I think that like doubling and things like that, like I love it. It sounds so slick, but you also, with every layer that you stack, you lose emotion in the performance. So there's a constant balance, in the recording process. I'm like, yeah, let's double that. Let's put a harmony on that. Like I'm very involved in that, but then very often in the mix, I start finding that the more I have that, the less I feel any kind of emotion from the performance. So very often, like, and Matt's probably irritated with me on this because there's like tons of harmonies on this record
And
that
they're
are
all
like
bad.
really in depth, and I buried them. I did.
I was so excited. I was so excited to pull a freaking Freddie Mercury Haunty Curse.
They're all over it, and I'll publicly say that's my fault that they're buried. But I very often I liked how they made the vocals feel slick, but I felt when I could really hear them, I didn't feel like it was as tough. Like depending, and it depends on the part. Like obviously some parts are louder than others, but as a general rule, I don't know if that even answers the question because it's more of like an approach than it is.
That is something I wanted to mention too, because like I really liked that process. Where I think it would maybe stress a lot of people out, but I really appreciate you being down for the process. I wanted to experiment with the vocals. We did all the prep up until when it was time to record vocals. I recorded it safely, and everyone from my stream understands the safe thing because like it's the way I warm up for tour. So we did all the mains super safe and light and super technically, knowing we'd come back around like we did on Sin in the Sentence. Josh had me re-record the vocals on that record 2.5 or 3 times. So we did it really safe, then did all the super high harmonies, worked our way down, safe screaming, then came back and did the super gruffy singing, then the super gruffy screaming. And then we're like, all right, we're done. And then you're like, wait, man, I need you to come back and do a couple more in a couple of days. And then we did more again. And then my voice felt horrible. I remember we did like a 6-hour day of screaming on Sin, and I felt like I had the flu. It was terrible. I think we had
double the screams.
No, only on some parts.
Only on some parts, but not usually.
The mains are solo. But what's crazy too, that I always thought I was the kind of singer that need to be double, tripled, or quadded to sound good on a record. That really intense singing that you sort of unearthed out of me on this one, I think that's solo tracked a lot of the time.
It's definitely not tripled. It might be doubled at parts, but it really depends on the section. I love that sound. I like
some of those parts we had like 8-part vocal harmonies, but I totally agree with you. It did take away from the intensity of the main. It really did.
It really, and again, it's per part, because I know there's a couple spots on the record where like a big kind of choirish answer comes along, but as like a general rule in like the choruses, I might have leaned on one harmony and had the other ones in there just as kind of like making it sound slicker, for lack of a better term.
I'm gonna have to
definitely better to have more. Definitely to have more options. At least like when you get into the mix, you're not like, we don't have enough stuff.
For sure.
What I learned from you, Josh, is stacking things, like stacking vocal stuff beforehand, which is really cool. That's what I did. Like I picked your brain about my stream setup. Like you helped me pick out the rack stuff. So I've got EQ into preamp and EQ into compression, into even like more compression and noise gate. I also have this ready to go.
I can hear your compression and your noise gate in my headphones.
Much of this, did we, Josh?
No, we didn't.
Much of that, did we? But yeah, so the compression, that's you. So I don't know if 2 compressors, is it okay to have 2 compressors? Is that bad? Is that okay?
I mean, if it sounds fine, I think for Twitch streaming, I'm sure it's fine.
About to get critiqued. You're getting mixed tips on the stream.
Actually, I should be asking.
He's like, you dial this in for me?
Does it sound okay? I hope it is.
No, it's just it's fine.
A little 1K out of it.
The more compression you have, the more like hiss and like background noise you're gonna have, which requires the gate. So like it's
yeah. My house.
You're hearing me through an Avalon 737 in a distressor right now.
Oh man, using distressor to talk to us.
Fanciest setup right there.
Yeah, man.
Well, since we're talking about doubles and quads or whatever, we should talk a little bit about guitar stuff. I feel like because with this one, this was mostly this was double tracked, right? I think Corey probably had most hands on with the amps of any of us. But yeah, I guess like what was the tone we were after on this one for the guitars? Because I know I think we used different head this time than the last time.
Yes,
sure,
definitely.
We use the triple X.
We use the triple X
for the rhythms. The JSX for like melody stuff, and then when we're in LA, we reamp the solos with 5153s. We had two.
What did we use on the last one? What was the main amp on the last one?
Sin of the Sentence, the main one was the 5153 that Josh had, that 50 watt.
Yeah, the one sitting right beside me.
And then,
I have Corey's.
Also,
I have Corey's
JSX,
list.
The JSX was the solo tone on Sin, and then we use like 4 different amps for all the guitar parts just to get something slightly different.
Yeah, I have the whole list from Corey of the history. Ember was a triple X Ascendance. He was a 5150/Recto. Crusade, Bogner, Uberschall. Shogun, Holmes, a 5150/1/2. In Wave, 6534 plus solos, maybe a 6505. Vengeance Falls was a 5150/6534. Reamped with a Kemper of 5153. Sounds was a 5153. T-Sats was a 5153 and a JSX. Deadman, triple X, M2. Melodies, JSX. Solos of Corey, 5153. EL34. Matt, 5153. Stealth.
So wait, Ember to Inferno was also a triple X?
Yep. So it came full circle.
Cool.
And was always some form of overdrive in the front. But now Corey turned around a clean boost, and I've got like every clean boost.
What's like maybe? I mean, probably can't go into everyone, but like obviously you said it was the triple X on this. Like compared to the last one, what would be like a real like difference between the two? Because I mean, obviously P definitely has a certain tone to it, and I feel like it's associated now with Trivium. Like we've only ever used them pretty much for the main tones, but like why did the triple X like edge out the other ones this time?
We didn't have anything.
Yeah,
we had nothing.
Besides that, well, because we could
I love Corey's honesty.
Like no, but like because we could technically reamp though, like so we could have used any amp.
We could, but so many times, like when you're making a record, people always, I mean, before I made records, I would like listen to an album and be like, why does that sound like that? Why is this way? Why is this, like you just assume that like, every record is a snapshot in time of like what's going on and where you are, right? Like, and I know you guys probably know that as you move farther along in your careers, like you have to look at each record as its own little unit and like where you were and what was available. And, you got to get this record done. Now, if you had, if you didn't want to have the record done in any, I don't know. I mean, we could do like a Tool record and spend 7 years and try every amp on the planet to, make sure like whatever. That doesn't seem like the Trivium way of working.
I
you
like
guys
to just work. Just let us work.
Well, you guys kind of know what you want, and you're all players. So in a lot of ways, and I definitely noticed this like working with you guys, actually this could go on for a lot, like any band that has players in it, sometimes the process of like dialing in tones is such a hindrance to the making of the record. Like you want to roll, like you're like, can we just go? Like even on this record though, we started with the Kempers, right? Just because it's like, let's record and we'll get the tones, like you just want to get rolling until we could find an amp that we all like the sound of, which just happened to be, we got a JSX and it sounded great. And we're like, cool, let's roll with this. We knew we liked the sound of the Kemper, so if we did anything that sounded remotely better than that, like we were already going to be stoked on, right? Now, everyone signs off and loves what we got going on. So, I mean, could I have taken it back to my studio and reamped it like 30 times? Like, yeah, but like we all liked it. It's good. Like, and that's such like a can of worms too when you open that up. If we all walked away high-fiving that we were feeling it, there's no reason for me to like reinvent it when I get it back to my studio.
Well,
you know what I mean?
I was saying in it when we were talking about guitar stuff in another interview, I was like, we've done the process before of having like 15 different amps and all these different cabs and trying every head into every cab, and then after a while, you just don't remember or have any clue of what fucking sounds good.
You definitely lose perspective.
You like confuse yourself. So it's like having this time. We basically had 2 amps, so it was like, all right, this is what we have to work with, and it's like, and we're just like, oh, it sounds good, let's fucking roll with it. So, sometimes also this is too many options. You get it just like there's so many options, you just no one knows really where to go with it.
Sure, you get lost in the weeds. But you guys, I mean, listen, this is your 8th record, right?
Ninth record.
Ninth record. So I would think after 9 records, you got a pretty solid idea of like what you like in a guitar tone and what you don't.
Yeah.
You already know there's like a handful of PV amps or 5150s or whatnot that are going to do what you want, you know? So if like I know which amps I like to go to, you know what I mean? In fact, that's why we ended up with the JSX in the room and the Triple X. Like I was like, I know I like these 2 amps. I think they're actually technically the same amp. That's a whole nother discussion. But even so, like I could pretty much have started this record with only 2 or 3 amp options, knowing what's going to get what I want. And you could have done the same thing. Like had you had the amp collection that I know you now have.
Next record, yeah, man, we've got it. We have everything.
There's like a decent chance we'll end up with the same 2 amps that we ended up on this record. You know, like, like
I already know that the next one's going to be a 5150 block or a 34 plus for sure.
But that's what I'm saying. You're going to walk in with those amps, and then I'm going to walk in with one amp that I want to try, and it's going to be one of those.
Like the studio itself and just like the riffs and stuff you play. It's like when you get in there and you actually start like playing the music you've written, and you're in this studio and the environment around you, it can really affect the sound, you know, how you, because you might be like, oh, this is the amp, and then you get in there and some other one comes out of nowhere and like, yeah, this is the way to go with it because it just sounds great in here.
There's so many variables on guitar tone, and it's such like a common question. Everyone's like, what do you do with guitar tone? I'm like, oh my God, man, there's so many variables in guitar tone, and the EQ after the fact in the mix is so massive. Like that alone can completely change a guitar tone, is the EQ that you put on it in the mix phase of things. So, you know, I could have made it or blown it in the mix depending on your perspective, but like that's
we've had people do that, then we've had to call you immediately for you to fix it.
No, jeez.
Well, I remember when we like reamped the guitars at Full Sail. I actually Kemper profiled the rhythm tone, and then once you got the mixes, once you did all your stuff in the mix, I compared it and I was like, wow, this profile sounds like crap compared to the record. And I was like, what'd you do to it? And you're like, I can't really describe it. It's too much shit. So I was like, the profile like was pretty much useless to try to.
It is the same tone, I swear to God.
I use this story quite a bit, but one of my favorite things that's ever happened with me and Corey, we were interviewed on a guitar magazine. They're like, well, how would you describe like what you do to learn a part like this, guys? And they asked me first. I'm like, well, what you want to do is you want to take it slowly, maybe about 60 BPM. Let's make sure the room temperature is just right, sitting with the proper posture, no distractions around. My answer goes on for another 10 minutes. Corey's like, you just fucking do it.
No, that was the question. Was how do you learn to sing and play at the same time?
Oh,
and you were talking about like, oh, you got to go really slow and learn all the parts. I'm like, yeah, you just fucking do it.
Let's do it.
You put on your big boy pants and you do it.
What I love when Josh and Corey start talking to each other, because you're both Mainers, you both pick up a Maine accent in the studio, and then you'll do like impersonations of it. Then it like starts to get cooked into your normal voice.
Do I have a Maine accent?
When you two hang out, you both do.
You get us a Dunkin' Donuts cold brew, it just comes out.
Hell yeah, dude.
You're talking about Moxie's. What's Moxie again?
Oh yeah, Moxie.
It sounds like a drug, but it's like a soda, right?
Yeah, I have some in here. I always have there's always a stash of Moxie at my studio.
What are Moxies again? Is it like
I have
a polar?
two family members.
Energy drink.
2 family members that have Moxie tattoos.
Wait, it's an energy drink or it's a soda?
But it's like a
soda.
It's like a regionally specific energy soda thing.
It's not
It's
an
like
energy soda. It's like a root beer.
Does it have concentrated lobster powder in it?
Lobster.
No one outside of New England really knows what it is.
There's
I've never even heard of that.
Real talk. There's a deli by my house. It's like a New England deli. They got like Patriots and Red Sox and Celtics like stuff all over at it.
Bruins.
And it's a bomb deli. And I went in there with Randy from Lamb of God, and he's like, I feel like I'm like up in New England in here. I was like, that's why I love this place. It's so sick. I live in California, for anybody who doesn't know that. And while we're in there, I was like, you know, the only thing that make this more legit is if there was like Moxie. And the lady behind the counter is like, they're from like Rhode Island. She's like, you want a Moxie? And I was like, yeah. She's like, hold on one second. She comes out with a literal case, like a full case, and she just puts it, and she's like, you can take it. I was like, what? She's like, I can't sell this shit. It's just taking up space on the shelf.
Oh my!
And I literally walked out of there with like a case of Moxie.
That's so awesome.
I remember last summer when I went to Maine for a family thing, and I went to my Uncle Jimmy's convenience store and like went to go get like a drink, and I just saw a Moxie, and I just texted you a picture of it. Like, I'm like, guess where I'm at? I'm like, oh, you must be in Maine.
Hell yeah, dude. I'm actually rocking the Halo. It's a Maine studio.
That's awesome. My favorite thing is when we play shows in the Northeast area, like Worcester or something. Corey, your parents are the cutest parents in the world. They like make a weekend out of it. They drive to the show. They got the cooler. They got the hotel by the venue. It's so awesome. They like. I remember the first time your mom ever hung out at one of our shows. She's like, "Oh, I've been practicing my swear words all day on the drive up." They're so awesome. I love that.
Practicing my swear words. What?
Yeah, it's awesome.
They'll just come to the show and just drop F-bombs like all night, like on purpose, just to
trying to fit in.
They're so awesome. They're so awesome.
I usually have to be the sober one because usually everyone's like pre-gaming like on the drive down, so I have to deal with like 15, 20 like ripped fucking relatives like at the show.
Fucking Trivium!
All right, let me.
I don't actually even know how to talk in a Maine accent. I grew up in southern Maine. It's like right on the border of New Hampshire.
You guys do it sometimes. When you guys do like parodies of it, it gets really good.
You're talking
about gear though. I wanted to mention the gear part that you were talking about earlier. You can have you can basically have the rhythm tone of this record with the exact same gear for Paulo, Corey, and myself, and it would not sound the same. That's another variable. Like the player. I remember playing through Rob Flynn's rig before, and I loved the sound of his tone. I played it; it sounded terrible. He played it; sounded great.
I can actually confirm that because I was dealing with a bass sound on a record I was just recently mixing, and I was really struggling with the bass. Wasn't one of my own productions, and I was just struggling with the bass tone. I'm like, I cannot get this thing to sound good. And then I was like, hey, Paulo, can you send me your Kemper profile from the record? And then Corey actually already sent it to me, and I forgot. And I fired it up and ran like this bass tone through it, and it sounded terrible. Like I didn't end up using it. It sounds sick on your record, but it's just sounded absolutely horrible on the record that I was making. I mean, bass is so player and instrument specific. Like I've had, I mean, the bass sounds great on this new Trivium record, and I've had terrible experiences with Warwick's. Paulo makes them sound incredible. You know, like I've had both. Like it can go either way. Like he's got it dialed in. Like it works for his hands.
Paulo tone fingers Gregoletto.
Yeah. Sound of wood. Someone was asking like, a lot of people have been asking what I used on the record, and I was like, I essentially just used my live rig, which is just the Warwick, the Kemper, and that EBS pedal, the multi-band compressor that you showed me a couple of records ago. But like from there, like what's kind of your tip or idea of how to mix bass in the mix? Because like that's actually, I feel like that's like such a hard thing to get to sit in a mix and actually sound like really good, because it's like where it sits in the mix, it's either buried or like if it's too much, it can be really like distracting. Like what's kind of your take on like when you're approaching bass on a mix?
I think on the mix on this one, actually, so like your tone is like incredibly clear, like crystal clear, like really articulate, and like perfect top end. And the only thing I felt like it was missing was any kind of like flows. So if I remember correctly, I think I supplemented it with I think I used the EBS Fafner and just supplemented it. The tone on the record is probably 85% exactly out of your live rig, and then another 15%, and then a 15% of like what I supplemented to kind of get a little more kind of low end girth out of it, if you will.
So that would be like
based on crazy on the record.
Like two channels then, essentially. Like you'd have it kind of like that sort of blend.
Yeah, I had two channels running. One was your Kemper and one was the Fafner. And and then blended the two of them, and it's definitely like very heavy, the tone that you gave me out of your Kemper.
Interesting.
And then obviously like whatever compression or EQ used in the mix, which I don't remember what it was.
I'm getting a lot of questions in here about your thoughts on amp modeling and suites, like the software-based amps, Kempers, Axe FX versus real heads. Your thoughts?
I don't have a huge preference one way or the other, really. Every record I've produced, I've used a real amp, and not because I'm like anti-Kemper. I mean, I like using amps. I like setting up microphones. I like capturing something that is going to be unique to this. Like, we'll never get this tone the same, even if we use the exact same setup. It won't be the same if we do another Trivium record. You know, like it's not. We'll never be able to get it. So it's going to be special to this album. It's going to be the identity of this record, because if you move a microphone a half an inch on a cabinet, it's a totally different tone. You know, like microphone placement on a cabinet is huge. And I've even moved my cab and marked the exact same spot, you know, into a new studio, and then like try to use the same preamps that I have here at my studio. And it's like pretty goddamn close, but like not exactly the same, you know, like it's just, but that's part of the charm of it to me, you know, like, can't we just have something that's awesome for what we're doing that no one else
Maine. Charm sounded Maine. Sorry. Charm sounded Maine. There it is. Okay. Sorry. You said that no one else. Continue.
Like, you know, like this is going to be a unique identity to our record that we just made. And to me, that's worth something. People are making tons of awesome profiles now. Like there's tons of great ones. And, you know, sometimes they use them for overdubs, or like, you know, if there's very often, like I have a particular profile that I like to use sometimes on like a chorus overdub lead every now and then, you know, just because for some reason the way that I mic cabs and the way that profile sit together make it sound unique. But I've mixed records that have been all Kemper. I think I read I didn't even know that the Parkway Drive record was Kemper's. You know, like when I mixed it, I didn't even notice. So, you know, I think there's great profiles, and then I think it's really what you want to do and what's working for what you got going on. I still kind of feel like I'll say this about the profiles. It's rare that I find one that I like as much as a real amp, for sure. Like I can dial up 5 or 6 amps and end up with a tone that I'm like, this will be sick on any record. More often than not, I'll scroll through a ton of profiles and be like, these are garbage. And there'll be like 1 or 2 that's decent. I don't know what that's worth, but maybe you know.
The amount of profiles I have on my computer is ridiculous, and I don't use any of them.
No, it's usually something with the high end that doesn't sound right to me, no matter what. And I can usually tell if I'm sent a record that has a profile. It's often, very often when I'm sent a record with a profile, I might end up reamping that in the mix process. It happens very often because I always have a cab mic'd up here at my studio, and I have all my heads over here, and I can just kind of patch into one or the other. And I mean, we did that on one of your records, I think.
Yeah.
You know,
I've been able to test a lot. What I found is that it's almost indecipherable for the audience as far as profile, suite versus head, but the player really noticed. That's what Corey and I have noticed, that we actually play more. I felt like I had been, as soon as I plugged in a real head and then this Box of Doom cab thing, or like any cab, I'm like, I'm playing more like myself now than I ever played like myself since I started using modelers. It's more of like this like 0 millisecond delay between my playing and the response of the cab.
I actually also find how it sits with the cymbals. I know it's a weird thing.
It's more like, high end in the samples.
The Kempers are generally like super bright and sizzly, but not in a pleasant way. And that's a lot of times when I end up reamping. If I'm given a profile that I don't like, the reason I reamped it is because when I was mixing it, I'm like, why can't I get these cymbals and this guitar to sit? And I find I'm doing these weird notches on the high end that I shouldn't have to do. And after a while, I'm like, forget it. I'm just going to put up a microphone and like, this is all going to sound right, like immediately. I'm making it sound like I'm an anti-profile.
No.
I'm not. They're fine.
No, I mean, I think like Kempers and the Fractals. I mean, obviously we've been using those over the years, and I think that's like the great thing now is you have such a wide range of gear to pick from like any situation. And I mean, the Kempers for like travel and stuff, you really can't beat that, and to be able to replicate those sounds. But
sure,
you know, definitely in the studio, like I do think, you know, you are trying to capture that moment, like you said. So, you know, it is nice if you have the time and the luxury of having cabs and amps and like the right kind of microphones to be able to like sit there and set it up and really capture this like 1 in a million type tone that, you know, you'll never hear the same exact tone on a Trivium record, even if a lot of the amps are similar styles. And that's like what makes it awesome.
it'll live in the same. Sorry, Corey.
Oh, I was saying, off what Paula was saying was, like with like tube heads and stuff, you can get like that magic amp. Like they made like, I bought like the same amps that we used on the record, and I guarantee probably the exact same amp that I have probably sounds different to that one, because it's like you get those manufacturing things, like maybe the tubes in this one just kind of work better. Because you always hear about all these bands that like have like a particular like I have like 5 5150s, but this one particularly sounds like amazing in the studio. So it's like you can kind of find those like quirky amps that just have like this extra magic to it that even the same amp from the same brand, like two amps could sound totally different in the same situation, that you just have that magic one that worked for that record. Because, as Matt read the list, it's like we use like a different PV on every record, because we would bring the same or get the same amps that we used on the previous record, and then we ended up on the next record using a different PV, because that one particularly in that studio at that time had that something extra that the other amp, even, just gear in general, like I brought the same guitars as like previous records, and then this record, like certain ones sounded better for the situation. So it's like, it's always fun when you find like that kind of the amp that just kind of works with the music for this particular record. And it's like profiles are kind of like the same thing, and you can kind of find that magic amp for the album.
Josh, I even hunted one of these out. These things don't exist anymore, and I had to put an open call on all my social medias, and I had to trade some pretty extensive stuff for these things. But this is what Frederick Thorendal from Meshuggah, he bought all of them in the world and is just hoarding them now, apparently, and he won't give them up. But these are apparently the absolute greatest things to run in front of heads. Like
I'm glad you got it after the record.
I know, dude. I know. But you know what else is crazy? Look at this power jack. Look at this. It's a power jack that doesn't exist anymore. It's a 3.5 millimeter jack, and this thing requires 18 to 32 volts to run. So I'm still waiting on the power thing. I had to order it from somewhere. It's gonna take a while, but this is supposedly.
You don't
like
even
the
know
best
if it sounds good.
No,
it might,
I have two of them now.
Sound terrible.
I have two now.
It's fake.
Yeah, I bought something similar to that, so I got to wait for a power supply too.
Yeah,
that's all right. I got a 1 in a million SM57 now that I'm now actually super fired up on.
What's the difference of it?
Well, so years ago when I was in Japan, I don't think I brought it down for your record. I should have, but years ago when I was in Japan, I was working on this record, and the tech there, this guy. He had his name's Akira, and he had a SM57 that he was like, it was modded in some weird way, like it needed phantom power, and I was like, what? And I was like, it's 57. He's like, no, it's different. It's, and I was like, all right. And then we're listening back to the guitar tracks, and I was like, this sounds incredible. And I'm like, just for my own, like knowing the difference, can we put a regular 57 up so I can like listen to the two? And I like listened to it. I'm like, whoa, this does everything that a 57 makes it awesome on guitars, but it does it without the annoying 57 thing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I finally experienced that. It was a nightmare learning how to mic cabs for the first time.
So I was like, I want one of these. And this guy's like, there's a bit of a language barrier. And I was telling someone who could tell him, I'm like, tell him I want one of these, man. The dude, like, I didn't know that he had spent like a week looking for it, or something. And like, I just kind of forgot about it afterwards because I did want one, but he was like, I don't have one. They don't sell them. This guy made them. And then like, a week later, he's like, I'm sorry. Like they're not anywhere. And they're like, I'm telling you, if he says that you can't find one in all of Tokyo, then it doesn't exist. Like you can't have one. I was like, I'll buy yours. He's like, no way. So that was that. Like 2 months, like 5 years later, I got a package in the mail from Japan, and the dude built one and sent it to me.
Wow.
And I haven't even got a chance to like really use it on a record yet. So now like I have this like 1 in a million SM57.
So weird that he'd be like, I'd never sell it to you, and then 5 years later send you something like.
I think he spent 5 years building it. I'm going to tell myself that.
Yeah.
What did you give him for this?
He was like Iron Man in a cave, just working, like trying to like escape and make the right.
I don't know, man. You might plug this thing in, and then your entire life gets sucked in, and you're in the Matrix.
That sounds like that's like such a classic like Japanese story of like, oh, I won't sell you mine, and then he just like makes it like a mission.
Oh, he was like the legendary sword, the legend, Masamune or Murasame, the guy that made the legendary swords.
Last thing I do is I'm going to
make sure forge the SM57. Josh, I need to ask you a question.
So we got your TC pedal. We'll do another record with your TC pedal with Corey's amp and my SM57.
And your hot mic.
Gonna be sick.
Should I get, what's that crazy mic pre, like the best Neve one? Is it 1077?
1073s.
1073s. Do I need that for my stream rig, or is that too much?
That is so excessive for a stream rig.
I wanted to check. I've been thinking about it, but they're so expensive. It's like $3,000
mic pre. You can need $6,000.
I don't know if you're gonna be able to tell the difference like with that on a stream.
I was thinking about it. I was thinking about buying a clone, not the original. I was thinking about buying a clone. But how much?
I got another drum question here.
I have one right here.
Another drum question from people.
Yeah.
I think this kind of goes along with the whole
somebody wake up
Alex. Thing where, this kind of goes along with the amp where, like, you know, whatever
he's having to listen to all these guitar nerd things.
Well, whatever amp you use on a record, you know, obviously identifies that record or whatever. And people were asking like how you pick a snare for it, because I mean that to me is like a very, very big part of the mix. I feel like a snare sound can really make or break, you know, how great something sounds, because it kind of sits in the center of the mix. And, you know, I know the snare you picked for this one was like a really killer one, and maybe talk about the story of that as well.
We used the Gretsch. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Alex.
Oh, I was going to say, like the same thing. As far as for me, you were telling me about this awesome Gretsch snare that you were hoping to use. You were like, yeah, man. You're like, I've been wanting to use it for a long time. I know that Taylor Hawkins, he loved it so much that he bought 5 of them. And then somehow I think you were able to like, or no, we just used one of his. And then you were like, I remember you were super stoked about that snare.
There was one song on the Korn record that I did in particular. Like, and that one particular song, I was like, whoa, this snare sounds sick. And I hit up Ray and was like, what snare did you use on this song? And he was like, that was like a Gretsch bell brass. And I was like, I'm buying that today. And so I've been kind of fired up to use one ever since. But the snare that we used actually on the Sin in the Sentence is a badass snare that I'd gladly use any day.
The Mapex Black Panther, I think. Or not Black Panther. Is it? Yeah.
It's like the hand-hammered Black Panther one.
Yeah.
I think I actually used on the tune track pack I did. There's actually that exact snare is on it.
Oh, nice.
What are like some of the tone qualities you look for with like a snare in a mix?
Snare's tough, man. I mean, everything's tough. It alls got to kind of sit together, and it's crazy how much it's very interesting how actually just the EQ of the bass and guitars will change the snare sound. Because what's covering up the decay of the snare. I've had mixes that I've done where I'm struggling with the snare, and then I just start changing the EQ on the guitars, and all of a sudden the snare that I could barely hear and was barely forcing its way through, all of a sudden just like create a space, and it's sitting right where I thought it should be sitting. And honestly, the only thing that makes snares tricky nowadays is like the loudness wars, you know, which are hopefully over now. But because the first thing to get eaten up by mastering is usually the snare drum. So there's always a give and take with the mastering engineer. I find more than anything, like when I get a master back, like one of the first things I notice is what changed on the snare drum. Like it either got crushed or sometimes it gets like snappier, you know, in particular. Actually, on your record, the snare actually gets snappier after mastering than before.
Yeah, when we got those masters back, like the things that I definitely noticed, like cymbals were like really like crisp, and you could hear them even better, kind of like popping out. And you know, of course, the snare tone kind of changed, and that's kind of like really to me always the craziest part about mixing. It's like you always have to anticipate what the mastering is going to do to the overall sounds of like each instrument.
Sure. And you know, Ted Jensen, right, did this record. He's phenomenal. He's one of the best in the world. He this is actually there was no revisions, right? Like I did the mix, we sent it to Ted, we just got it back, and we're like, let's roll. Like, it somehow gets snappier and cleaner. We all thought the mixes were like crystal clean when I sent it to him. I got it back. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
How did it get cleaner?
It's really crazy.
Should it get messier after mastering?
Yeah, it's pretty wild, like how much it can change, and just over the years of like experiencing like what mastering can do. And like when the first few records we did, I remember when we would get masters and like be like, wait, what the hell? It changed it totally. We're not like, this is not what we wanted, and kind of like trying to like figure out how to, split the difference of like things with like the mix and the mastering. But obviously now a lot more. It's just like it really does enhance. If you have a great mix, the mastering enhances all of the stuff if you put into it.
Paul, you remember
we
were when we got the first masters for Waves, and it was for the song in Waves, and the way they mastered it, we're just like, it sounds like shit. It's all like blown out and you can't hear shit. And they're like, dude, that's the hype mix. We're like, the hype mix? What the fuck are you talking about? Like, we're just like all like, because it like sounded so different from the mixes. And we were just
the hype mix.
It was just like, dude, it's like, you might not hear the snares well, but it's the hype mix. And this is like, no, it sucks.
Do you know, did I master Sin and Sentence?
Yeah.
I did, right? I guess that's one of the good things when I do master my own records, which I don't always do, but at least there's,
you can like monitor it.
I know what it sounds like, pre and post mastering, that's for sure. But this I usually do that anyway nowadays. Like when I'm mixing, I kind of have like a when I say I mastered the sentence, it's kind of a joke. I turned it up. I literally did nothing. It's like all same thing when I mastered a Korn record. I just turned my mix up, and that was it. There was no EQ or fancy multiband or any craziness. I literally just turned up the output into a limiter or a clipper. Done. But I'm not a mastering guy.
Well,
we didn't answer any of that snare shoot. We moved right on past the snare.
Yeah.
Josh, I was going to bring up something.
Whichever one sounds best in the room.
I was going to bring up something for you, Josh, that I thought was kind of funny, was that we ended up using the same exact drum setup on this record that we did with Sin in the Sentence, as far as Frankensteining yours and mine kit together.
Yep. And we added an 18-inch tom that neither of us owned, same as we did at Hybrid Studios.
Yeah. And I don't even think we tuned that big 18 one. I think it was like last time where we just hit it once and we were like, yep, that's going to be on the record.
It was like the Foo Fighters stuff, right? We were like, yeah, this will work.
Yeah, I just thought it was...
I was going to say, Alex, I remember you posted a picture of that kit and everyone's like, what the fuck is that? Like, it was like all mismatched and like
Riff Shop
colors.
Kit.
Yeah,
I was trying to take a photo of the mics for Rode because they made some sick mics that I'd never used before, and I used them on the toms. I'm probably going to use them a lot more. Like I love them. I used a couple other ones too, but I remember specifically posting a photo, staring at it for like 2 hours, going, "There's no way to identify that this is Alex's kit, right?" Like because we hadn't announced the record, right? So I'm like trying to not like blow the secret. These little internet detectives. Someone right away was like, "Is that Alex Ben's kid?" I'm like, "Come on, it's the rim of a tom."
Well,
I
think this brings us to another story that I want
to hear about this guy.
Quickly tell, and we won't. We're not going to identify. We're not going to say the name, but
no, please don't. I'm begging you not to.
No name. No, we are going to tell.
I'm begging you not to. If this is about another record that I did.
Oh no! Of course not. This is our record. This is our record. But we're not gonna say we're not blowing the lid off on anything else. But this is on this one because obviously Matt wasn't able to come out to the drum recording this time, so he got to miss this whole kind of it was kind of funny drama. But so we won't say the dude's name. But essentially, we had like a dude that was kind of like a studio assistant or whatever. Right. Kind of hanging out in the room and stuff. And it was great. Like we were, doing this, everything was cool. Like everyone at the studio is amazing, everyone super pro or whatever. And I think it was Corey, was it you that got the thing from Trivium World?
Yeah, it was just Alex was tracking and and we were just obviously sitting in the room, and I was just on my phone, just like on like I got a notification from the Trivium World Facebook thing, and this was like, I guess maybe like it was later in the evening, so it was like not many people, I guess, were active online. But I just saw this posting that just posted like a couple minutes ago, and it was someone's phone screenshot, and someone posted like a screenshot of a text message and like, dude, Trivium's in the studio I working at, blah blah blah, and I was just like, who the fuck would post this? Like, who here? And I just saw the little thumbnail of like who it was. I'm like, it's that motherfucker standing 5 feet from me. Like, so like I showed Josh my phone, and he was like, fucking told the dude. And we brought him in, and I showed him my phone, and he like grabbed my phone. He's like, hold on. He's like, that wasn't me. Hold on. He like started running off with my phone. And I'm like, dude, put that phone back. What are you doing? And so like, yeah, he like was, he really wasn't, he wasn't even supposed to be a part of the session, but he was like the runner at the studio, and he would come in like to take trash out or see if we needed any like food orders
Trash
or something like
eat.
that. Yeah. And then he just like started to just like stay in the room for like extended amounts of time. And
You know he's watching this right now for sure.
probably
He has your
we
real
won't name
phone.
him though.
He copied
No,
your
but
phone.
the best thing is that out of like the whole thing, like obviously we got it taken down or whatever, but we did get we got a free meal on the studio because of it. So that was the,
you got a
it
badass
all was
sushi
well.
dinner.
Yeah, we got a like good sushi dinner out of it. So, but we were like, wow, we got this far. We were at Full Sail all this time. All these people saw us over there. We were able to keep it under wraps, and we almost had it totally blown with an insider in the studio, like texting people, and like
I
it
actually
just
couldn't
so
believe-
happened to go to our
I can't believe you took your
fan
phone.
club.
Like, what was
Yeah.
he gonna go do?
I don't know. No, that wasn't going to get rid of the evidence, but
I
I love
can't
it,
believe
though.
we got through the full sale
Alex,
experience
did
without.
did
anyone
run into
Yeah,
a
man. We
man or
had
something?
an entire college campus, and every single student respected us, like our privacy there. Like, not one student posted about it.
What'd you say, Corey?
I think did you say you fucking ran into him at NAM like that's his last NAM?
Yeah, it was kind of awkward. It was one of those things where you both see each other and you both just kind of walk by each other.
Yeah, that was,
we
that
didn't
was
speak.
funny.
Remember when you almost blew the lid on the fact that we were making a record? You know, that's like a thing about making records that like I really try. A lot of the bands that I work with, at least, like I never do like, and it's amazing how people don't put it together. Like I just posted this photo of myself in the studio with Art Cruz, and someone's like, "I thought we were on quarantine." I'm like, "Dude, this was months ago." Like, I almost never post like I'm in the studio right now doing this.
Yeah.
Like, it's like we save that for it blows the lid on the release. You know what I mean? I'm not too into the like, look at me making the record right now.
Yeah.
You
Some
wouldn't do
people
a lot
love
like that, and the
bands love it.
excitement. Yeah, but the excitement drops off so hard. Like if they're doing it because it's fun, that's one thing. But if they're doing it because they think it's like promotional, the excitement drop off is really fast, and that's why we like to do records secretly.
Yeah, I guess there's an argument for both, right? Like there's bands that are so good. I mean, you're obviously one of them. Really, like you're so good at social media that they can use the entire process to build the hype. And I guess that's the two worlds of thinking, right? You can build the hype through the whole thing, or just drop it like an atomic bomb at the end. You know?
Yeah.
That's the best way. They'll be excited for like the first week or so, and then by week 2, they're like, "Well, there's another picture of a shoe and a mixing board and a beer can. I'm no longer excited." That's the way we look at it.
Especially when you can't show people like clips, or you don't want to show people like a phone clip of like music. That's definitely not gonna get it.
Yeah, because they'll make their entire like impersonation or like impression of the record off that. It sounds like it's recording a trash can, bro.
It sounded way better on the phone recording than it does on the. There's 2 questions I got here. I saw from Mark Morton, and he wanted
I already know
to
what this is.
know why you like instant coffee.
That is a good question.
Only Nescafe and
Man,
to make
that's-
iced coffee. We got on a pretty heavy Nescafe kick during the Lamb record, because it's so instant gratification. And except, you're supposed to add water, and Willie started like making instant coffee with coffee, like pouring coffee in a cup, dumping instant coffee into it, like make like this ultra turbo coffee. Like I don't know.
Heard you like coffee, so we put coffee in your coffee.
It's exactly what it was. The exhibit coffee. No, we got on a pretty heavy kick of that. I'm actually had one 10 seconds ago. It makes the best iced coffee. In New York, they'd make frappe at all the Greek places, and it's the same thing. And anybody that's Greek knows this, and anyone that lives in New York knows you can order frappe at any diner, and they make it with Nescafe, and that's really what it is. There you go.
Speaking of coffee, fucking during the sin of the sentence, that's where you unleash my Dunkin' Donuts cold brew addiction, because I hadn't drank coffee for like a couple of years, and then we started going into our main kick, and you're like, dude, you ever had a Dunkin' Donuts cold brew, bud? And I was just like, no. And you're like, I'm bringing you one tomorrow. And then you brought me one to the studio, and then I had one. I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. You're like, I know, right? And then it's like every day before going to the studio for this one, it was like texting, like, need a cold brew? I got you. I'll make a stop.
Living in California now, like they just started like in the last couple of years having Dunkin' Donuts out here. And when I was living in California, and I went back to Massachusetts to do a record, and I'd seen the commercials for Dunkin' Donuts cold brew, and I was big on the cold brew kick. I was doing my own at the house. And so I was like, as soon as I get off the plane, I'm going right to Dunkin' Donuts. I'm going to try out this cold brew thing. And I remember right into Logan, and I'm driving on this stretch where there's like literally 30 Dunkin' Donuts on that stretch from like Logan going north. But like pull in, got in the car, took a sip of it, and literally was like, yeah! And I've been on the kick ever since. And then like shortly after that, we were doing the sin of the sentence. And I'm like, Corey, yo.
Gotta get on.
You guys had a lot of that on that record, man. A lot.
I get Nick Rose
like every day. Dunkin' Donuts run.
He had one more question, and I think we're going for a bit, so maybe this is the good place to end on. He was saying, what's the most times you've eaten at the same restaurant in 1 week while producing a record?
Who asked that question?
Mark Morton.
Ooh. I know
you were
because we were eating Wawa. Wawa actually might be the answer.
Yeah, because you were like, dude, I think the whole time we were recording at Full Sail, you're like, dude, I think I'm gonna just eat Wawa the whole time I'm here.
I did. I had a sandwich of Wawa literally every single day, but that was only like 16 days. The actual answer to this question might be, he's thinking Ronnie's because he lives by like a barbecue spot that I was like pretty into. Or Buzz and Ned's, like, but no.
Buzz and Ned's.
Buzz and Ned's is like a barbecue spot, and actually, it's the creme. It's like the gold standard in like pulled pork, as far as I'm concerned. I just blanked. I knew the answer to this.
Well, I think by the end of what the dead men say,
it was Sons of Texas. We ate every single day at Chronic Taco. Every single day.
I think if we recorded in Orlando longer, we probably would have been hitting Four Rivers quite a bit near the end.
Yeah,
it was like every day was like, you want barbecue? And I'm like, dude, we had that yesterday. And you're like, I know, it was good. Let's go back. And I was like, oh shit.
At least when I like work with you guys, like I can get out and shoot hoops with Paolo and like.
Yeah, that's like our ritual for the last two records.
Yeah, it's
pretty
awesome
much
too.
Getting out and shooting hoops.
Yeah, now with this quarantine, the lack of hoop shooting is like hoop shooting.
Dude, it's actually funny. The park by my house that you guys always played ball at. There's like so many people there now. Like it's like everyone's going there to like. I saw like there was like 10 people playing like basketball at the same time. That small little court.
The one by your house.
Then.
Yeah, you can't even fit 10 people on that court.
They need to like put more over there. But yeah, I mean this was a great chat. Thank you for doing this with us today. I hope everyone got some good knowledge. You definitely know so much, and we've learned a lot from you. So thank you so much for doing these last few records with us. And
thanks.
man, it's been a pleasure. And look forward to the next one with all this fancy gear we're acquiring.
Right? The next Trivium
yeah,
record will be the sickest.
Well,
I-
we
we're
already
hyping it
confirmed
up.
Josh and Darren, so we texted both of them. Josh, you win next record? Yes. Full Sail, you win next record? Yep.
Let's do it.
All right.
Awesome. Thank
All
you so
right,
much,
well,
Josh. Thank you guys.
yeah,
Great
man.
to see everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. All right,
Okay,
friends.
guys.
Easy.
Have a good one.
Right.
Later.
Later.
All right. We good?
Well,
Thank
cool.
you.